What is up, Steeler Nation? We are back for another great episode on the one and only The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. A very special guest today. I'm Jay York Football. This is Mic'd Up Sports One. I guess we got the memo on the hat.
Yeah, I'm in the studio today, working hard, saving gas money, all the good things here. So excited to be on in a rather strange environment. But anytime we have a guest like we do today, it's worth jumping on from a moving vehicle.
Yeah. And why don't you tell the great people, our viewers, who this episode is sponsored by, or I could take it away?
No, I got you. I do want to let everybody know this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It can be easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with social gatherings picking up after the winter, of course. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that does not drain your battery. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/pits. That's PITTS to get 10% off your first month. Really good cause there. Absolutely something that needs to be brought to the forefront often. So hopefully you can do that. BetterHelp.com/pits. PITTS.
Good stuff. I love that. And this next guest, man, he's the creator of, well, we'll just get to it. Juliana, take it away.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Aaron Smith shields. Flacco, Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Yeah, JY, you mentioned it. An exciting guest today. Got some analytics we're going to talk about here. I see RAS scores on my Twitter timeline more than I see memes or GIFs or Steelers news at this point, and it's warranted, that's for sure. So excited to bring in the creator of RAS. That is Lee Platte. Kent, what's going on?
Not a lot, man. Happy you guys had me.
Thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to get into this a little bit more. First, tell us about the background a little bit. How does this start? How does one, create this very interesting analytic-driven data?
So the score itself actually started back in 2013, which was the Le'Veon Bell draft. It wasn't specifically just him, but that was kind of the tipping point. He tested for the combine. He ran a 4.6 in his 40-yard dash. And the entire argument for the rest of that draft period about Le'Veon Bell was just that he wasn't athletic enough to play in the NFL. But the rest of his testing really didn't tell that story. He had really good cone time, especially for his size. And his overall athletic profile, even considering that 40-yard dash, was very good. So the idea that we throw those buzzwords around without any context behind it really bothered me. So I developed a system that takes a look at all player testing from 1987 to a player's draft year and puts it on a 0 to 10 scale. Very easy to understand, 0 to 10. Nobody's going to think that 0 is the good one, right? All of the cards themselves, they're all stoplight color coded, red, yellow, and green. Another thing that anybody just at a glance can understand. We found a lot of really interesting stuff tracking the data and looking at trends and trying to find whatever correlations we can. But ultimately, the idea is just to create something that's easily contextualized and helps people understand what the context behind the testing is.
Yeah, no question. If I was doing an RAS score, I would be a red. Jordan would probably be a yellow, for what it's worth, if that gives you guys any context, because our athleticism is certainly not on par with any of these guys. What a guinea pig. Le'Veon Bell, certainly a guy obviously who had a great career, really gives a lot of context on how you guys are able to work. Are you surprised that it's taken off to this magnitude? Obviously put a lot of hard work behind this, but did you think it'd become this phenomenon?
No, never. The intention, like I said, was always just to make things easier to understand. And I think what really drove it is that there isn't really anything else out there that helps the average person to understand what these testing numbers mean, right? We have scores like Spark and things like that, which are all proprietary information. They're hidden behind a formula. I mean, they make sense in the data themselves when you actually look at the data. But if you don't have that data and all of the context behind it and what all the scores mean, it isn't as helpful. But with RAS being as simple as it is, it's much more accessible. And I think that's been the best thing I've been working with.
We're hanging out with Kent Lee Platte here on the Sick Podcast. Steelers, crazy. Kent, I'm curious, why have these scores gotten so much better over the years? Is it just natural progression of these athletes? Every time I see one of these, it's, X receiver ranked 58th out of 2,048. And I'm telling you, down the line, it feels like everybody is in the green. Are they utilizing this, with trainers, et cetera, to obviously try and improve their RAS above some other things, I would imagine?
There's some trainers that use it just as a guideline, just to put a number on it. But it's kind of like it always has been with testing. And RAS provides a useful analog for what NFL teams are using. Teams aren't using RAS specifically. But what a lot of teams are using is close enough to RAS that you can kind of get an idea of what your team is doing by using a metric like this, because it's close to whatever the metric is that they're actually using.
Sure.
As far as people getting more athletic over time, it's more that our data collection efforts have gotten a lot better and a lot more advanced. We're a lot better at just getting data and being able to analyze it. I have 26 or 27,000 players in the database right now. I think 22,000 with scores. And most of those are from 2010 and on. And that's just because we have the internet now, and we have all of these different sites that track this information. We've got a lot more access. We have people that are dedicated to trying to find this information and bring it forward. So we actually end up with a below average score. If we were to average all scores over the course of a year, it's actually below 5. But you don't hear about most of them.
Sure. We just see the good players, the individuals.
They're never gonna. Those guys aren't getting drafted. They're generally not even playing in the CFL or the USFL or any of those other ones. The guys with the really low scores, that's pretty much it. That's where their career ends. It's unfortunate, but that's usually how it goes. But the guys that get drafted tend to be superior athletes. The guys that get those starting opportunities tend to be the best athletes. So those are the guys that you hear the most about.
Makes sense.
What do you think the correlation has been with the scores in the success in the NFL?
So we've already did some testing and looking into players on rosters, and just making an NFL roster, you tend to get the best athletes. So ignoring even stepping on an NFL field, ignoring that part entirely, kind of a big part of being a football player, but just ignoring that. The players with high RAS are generally the guys that are making a roster, that are finding those starting jobs, regardless of anything they did in college or anything they've done in the pros so far. So we know that NFL teams pay attention to this data, and they keep track of it. They prioritize those types of guys. But it might just be that those are the guys who are the most successful too. And we've seen that with tracking Pro Bowls, 1,000-yard receiving season, rushing seasons, 10-plus sack seasons. We found that tracking all of those things, that the best athletes or the best players tend to be the best athletes. I think it's about 60% of all Pro Bowlers are above 8, which is the very top 20% of athleticism. About 60% of Pro Bowlers are in that top 20%. If everything was equal, you would expect those percentages to be similar, right? 20% and then 20%, but it's not. We have way more people with high testing and way less people who test poorly that actually find success in the NFL.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me into my next question. What goes into compiling all the data, and is it combine based, pro based, a little bit of both? Like, how does it, like, what is it overall?
So we currently use a hierarchy where we use the combine first, and then we use pro day data. After that, we'll use the HBCU combine and the CFL combine. The HBCU combine is still relatively new, so their data collection efforts and some of the accuracy information is not quite where I like it to be. So I have that below Pro Day, which is Pro Days have been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
There's always the hand time versus electrical times argument, but ultimately the data collection is reliable the way that we get it. And then the CFL combine has been around for a long time, but they don't track the 20 and 10-yard splits. So because they don't track that data, I kind of have that below. I'm actually doing some testing, though, to potentially change the RAS formula. It will be the first time since 2017 that I've changed anything with it, which would just be combine data first, and then any of those three would be in that next group, whichever one is best. So the idea is just to take the best representation of a player's athleticism that we can get in as close to like as we can get. There's other options that I don't want to spoil too much for, but there's other options that we'll be building into the site where people can look at different ways of looking at that data. But those aren't built out yet, and I don't know how long that'll take, so I don't want to tease them.
You're like constantly just working to get it better. I think that's great. And I think that what really spoke to me is because some stuff I'm like trying to grasp, but just on a scale of 1 to 10, I think it's very easy to understand for anyone. My next question too, before I throw it back to Mike, was, do you have any scouts or GMs like knocking on your door saying like, hey, like we need to know what's going on, like that sort of thing? Like, can you tell us any stories about that?
I talk to scouts all the time. It's part of where I get my data from. My data collection relies almost entirely on networking. You know, being able to find information is great. Knowing people who can find information and knowing how to ask those questions and get that information is better. This year, I'm starting to find now that, you know, this really picked up in 2017. So a lot of the players that are coming into the NFL this year or the last couple of years have grown up in high school with RAS. RAS has been around and has been a part of the public culture enough that these players know going into the draft period that that's a thing that they're going to hear. So this year, for the first time, it was all players in my DMs, just nonstop asking me questions about it. Dozens a day, not even exaggerating. So many players wanted to know their scores, and here's these other numbers that I got, and I did a private workout and got these numbers. You know, what does that look like? And it's really, really cool. It's part of why we built a calculator on every page, because we know that the official numbers that we get aren't necessarily the official numbers that players are being told, because they're getting told by a scout. If a scout has that number, that's an official number for at least one team, right?
Yeah.
So it's official for them. But, you know, we have to try to make sure that we're keeping it as fair as possible, too. If a player tells me they ran a 4.2, I'm not just going to take their word for it. But if they heard somebody say they ran a 4.2, they should be able to check that score on their page, and we try to make that available for them.
Right.
That's what I was just thinking, John. I'm like, they're trying to convince you to upgrade their score. Hey, I just ran up my stairs faster than I ever have. I'll send you a video of this. Bump me up a couple. That's pretty funny. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about the Steelers class, if you're open to that.
Yeah.
Oh, did he freeze?
I think he did. But we can talk the Steelers class.
Yeah, so just give us he's in his other office today, so we'll try and get him back momentarily. But yeah, just talk about the Steelers draft class. There he is.
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, I was just mentioning that the Steelers RAS score seemingly everywhere indicates that they had one of the most athletic classes. Is that something that, you know, you've considered? And tell me about some of the picks that have made that the case.
Yeah, and they definitely put more of a focus on it this year than they have in recent years. They've always put a focus on the first. Well, not always, but the Steelers in the mid 2010s, they didn't really put too much of a focus on athleticism early at all, and it really came back to bite them. We had Derek Barnes, Artie Burns, Jarvis Jones, guys like that didn't test very well. And I think that kind of bit them a little bit, and they realized, not Derek Barnes, that was the Eagles, the other Pennsylvania team I'm getting mixed up with, but Artie Burns and a couple of others as a corner. Senquez Golston was the one I was trying to think of. But they didn't really work out with those guys as much. But the guys they were testing that had the higher testing tended to, and I think the Steelers really took that to heart since about 2016 and have really been focusing on it with their early draft picks. TJ Watt's one of the most athletic linebackers ever, not just on the Steelers, but ever. You know, they tend to look at it now, I think, a little bit differently, and that really showed up in this draft class. All but one of the Steelers players was above 8, and the one that was below 8 was Zach Frazier, who was still a 7.67, which is just shy of 8. So all of their guys were really athletic. Mason McCormick was the highest rated guard in the class, or second highest rated guard in the class. So they definitely paid more attention to it this year. And I think you're going to see that in the first couple of rounds from them for a while. It seems to be working out.
Talk about relativity to position. I can't imagine many centers are jumping off the page, but is it based on the fact that they're a center or just the player in general?
So RAS is always compared to a player's position group. And it's interesting you brought up center, because center is one of those positions where we technically, like mathematically, we have a correlation, just like we do with other positions for RAS and success. But when you really start to dig in the granular bits there, it doesn't have as much of a correlation as other positions. There's plenty of centers that come out that don't have the best testing in the world and still find success. My personal theory in that is just that it's a much more cerebral position than other positions. But both of the Pouncey brothers were below 5. We've seen plenty of guys come out that didn't test very well at center that were still able to find success in the NFL. I think it's just because that position relies on north of the neckline more than your athleticism. But other than that, you know, the Steelers linebacker room is usually one of the most athletic in the NFL. They kept that up this year with Peyton Wilson, who had a 9.89 out of 10. They definitely focus on guys that can move and are explosive and quick when they build that linebacker room.
I think our viewers will be happy to hear that. So we'll talk before we get you out of here. I just had to ask you, so you're a Detroit Lions fan. Just tell us a little bit about that and then what's going on there. It seems like things are on the up and up.
Yeah, the Lions, I've been a Lions fan for a good portion of my life. And as you can imagine, that there are a lot of times when that's not super enjoyable.
You held on, though.
I did. And it's paying off now. You know, the thing about Brad Holmes, the Lions' current GM, is that he's very much a risk taker in some things, but he's also really conservative in others. And you'll find him take guys that have lengthy injury histories. We saw that with Jameson Williams, Zach Pascal. They just did it with Ennis Rakestraw. They've taken guys that have lengthy injury histories, and usually that's a big deal for an NFL GM because that generally doesn't work out. But he's balanced that out, those big risks, by taking what you would consider safer players like a running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, a linebacker in Jack Campbell, a tight end in Sam Laporta. You know, those where they're taking them, you're saying, oh, it's an overpay. There's positional value in all these things. Brad Holmes is doing that to balance out some of the other risks that he's taking, which is really not something you see around the NFL. And it's going to be interesting to see if this continues to succeed the way that it has, if other teams start to pick up that kind of a concept.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hey, man, it has been great picking your brain. We love everything that you're doing. I know that our viewers are really going to appreciate this episode. I know you're at the Math Bomb, but tell everyone what you got cooking up over there and where they can find you at.
Yeah, like you said, I'm at Math Bomb on most social media platforms or some variation thereof. You can find out all of this data up on my website at ras.football. It's all free. You can look up any player that you want from 1987 to today. There's all kinds of neat stuff that I've added in the last couple of weeks with different ways that you can look at the data, different ways that you can compare, and I'm going to continue to add those things as we go. As long as people keep engaging with it and we all keep enjoying it, I'll keep doing it. And if you want to talk football, reach out to talk football. I love talking football, if you couldn't tell.
Well, you're pretty good. You're pretty good at it, I'd say.
That makes three of us. That makes three of us, Joe.
Well, hey, Kent, we really appreciate your time, and we'll have to do it again.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's just – I just think that what really just the 1 through 10, I think it's just very, very, like, straightforward. And like you said, a lot of the guys are falling, like, in the 8 category. And I can't wait to get on the site and just tinker with it. But, yeah, another guy said masterclass. Omar Khan did it again. So it's that never gets old.
Green, yellow, red. It's color coordinated. It's like the game I used to play at the YMCA when I was sports director with my kiddos. Red light, green light, yellow light. So the Steelers got a lot of green lights. That means they're go, go, go. A lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, and a lot of, guys who should make an impact early on because of that athleticism. So it is, it's been a great episode for sure. I'm going to jump off, save some gas money here. The car's running so I can have air conditioning. Low hot day down here in Florida.
It's hot in Pittsburgh too.
It's hot in Pittsburgh too. There we go. And we'll see you guys next time.
We just skipped spring. Another great episode. Till next time. Peace.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.